but that's fine. You're good. You're good. Don't
No,
mess with anything. Don't
it's
mess with
the
anything.
it's
I'll
the
do it.
Chad juice. I'm like juicing
Yeah.
the gain up real high, so if I can like interrupt people with maximum power, I might as well,
Yeah, please don't do that. I beg you. Please don't like up your gain to just do that. That's no, don't that's bad.
Yeah, well, it's maximum bad faith potential. I mean, I listened to the last bit, like last 30 minutes or so of your previous guy.
Yeah.
Man, he did not come out of it looking very good. Like I must say, like he's supposed to be on my side. Like, he's a leftist and I am too, but man, yeah, he did not look good in that one. Um,
I it was just I think he was being like he was trying to be overly hostile and like I don't know. I try to only meet hostility with hostility and I try to meet like genuineness with genuineness, but like when you do that like I like when you did that shit I was just like, okay, well I'm gonna have to like go fuck you mode now cuz fuck you.
I mean, yeah, I think one of the things that would make somebody feel like they were talking to, for example, like a crypto Nazi, is like, for example, the fact that apparently you used to co-host the kill stream. Now, that's pretty sus, I must say.
I would counter that with saying point to like one thing I specifically said to say that, and also I guess like conversely also I'm not on good terms with Ralph, so I don't know. Maybe I'm too left wing for Ralph, but no, it's just I mildly criticized him and made fun of him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at like background lore. I don't actually know the details.
Oh
I
yeah,
saw your interview, and I've talked with you before.
yes you have.
Back then I was called, yeah, back then I think it was called Beyond Philosophy. But I mean,
We
nothing
talked
you've
about
said has
your
been
we talked about
particularly.
your Shadiversary video thing. 'Cause I think you were the one with the Wonder Woman didn't rape anybody thing.
Yeah, I got a lot of love for that one from
Yeah.
all sides.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah. I mean, like Shad is a pretty like big creator, so like I think that's like bound to happen regardless.
I mean, but I did what was basically essentially what the left might call a pro-rape position, and then the right, like, well, I dunked on like the
Oh,
idea
people
of,
from the left got mad
being
at you to that too.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I think a lot of my stuff, everybody gets mad. I mean,
it's
I just
okay.
did a eugenics debate on Politically Provoked, and I was like defending eugenics. So
Well, I think like
as
by the
far
end
as
of the day, like all people engage with like people are like genuinely okay with eugenics by like definition. Because like if you take a look at it from the position of if you do like genetic testing and the doctor says, hey, you and your partner, if you have kids, there's a 75% chance that they're going to inherit this genetic disease from you and it's going to be debilitating and bad. So if the people then decide it's like, okay, well, we're not going to have kids, we'll just adopt. That's technically eugenics.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically part of my position that we should have universal genetic testing covered by Medicare for all. It's like
Right.
the ultimate disease prevention policy. But then I got called a fascist in like the bread to Reddit
Oh
for
no.
posting it. So,
Rip. Well,
I mean, at,
you're
at least
expecting a lot of nuance
it,
from people who aren't like able to like hold more than two thoughts at once, I think.
well, I mean, I do generally trust the left to be a little less unnuanced than, for example, people on the right who like literally think vaccines are the devil or something like that.
Hmm.
But as far as your accusation that some people that like the left is
Oh
becoming
no,
this
no,
new
there's
pseudo
there's
religion.
there's a lot of there's a lot of people on both sides that like are like really dumb. So like the bell curve has like dum dums on both sides, you know what I mean?
Oh, sure. I mean, that is part of why I wanted to talk to you today.
Uh-huh.
I guess it's tonight for you. Um, I don't actually have a firm position on vaccine mandates, which is
Mhm.
why I didn't want to do a debate, but I wanted to discuss with you, like, kind of, the different scenarios that we can run through and see what those ramifications would be, and whether or not if we considered those more deeply, whether you or not you would be in favor of mandates for some certain situations and not for others.
Right.
So
Okay.
That yeah. So do you have yeah? What's your general position on vaccine mandates?
Okay, so my general position on vaccine mandates is right now, I don't believe that there is a mechanism in which the federal government is able to coerce people getting vaccinated. I think that maybe there is like a case to be made on like a state level in terms of like admission to public schools, because I think you already have that for that. But with the COVID vaccine specifically, I think that they can't really do that right now, just due to the fact that it's not even FDA approved yet. It's under emergency authorization, and it is like by definition still experimental. There hasn't like it passed clinical trials without like a lot of adverse side effects, but it is like still in the FDA's, position to do like very vigorous testing, that like the simple time gate of how long it's been since it was even like being developed would bar it from actually having, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I want to make sure this isn't like some sort of alarmist point that it's like not FDA approved. It's true that it's not FDA approved, but like the emergency authorization, it allowed developers to speed up the process by, instead of doing things like develop and then test or whatever, like do all your tests one at a time and in a row. Like you were able to
Do them in
do those
parallel.
testing and yeah, doing them in parallel. It
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean that the vaccines are like dangerous or anything. I think like the overwhelming data suggests that the vaccine will help save far more lives than it would even like fathomably take away. I think the data on that's pretty clear. I mean, 600,000 people have died from COVID already.
Right.
I'm not sure that vaccines could have the potential of even like getting close to killing 600,000 Americans. So I it's not wrong to point out the nuances of the case, but it's also important for you to be responsible in your messaging when it comes to
Well,
that, right?
again, I also would state that like, because like I got vaccinated. I have to get it for school and all that shit. And like I felt sick for a day and now I feel fine. But I also think that it is important to have like all the facts laid out. It's like, there's the whole thing about not being held liable because it's under emergency authorization. So there is like that to consider, all that sort of stuff. I think that it's important to understand that like people have a right to, informed consent. And even if like even after it gets FDA approved, I don't think that you can mandate it on a federal level or even a state level for that matter, honestly. I think that you can do like incentivizations in terms of like advertising campaigns if you partner with like certain businesses to give like a bonus, but like I don't think you can bar employment. I don't think you can add like heightened taxes on people if they don't get vaccinated. I don't think that like any of the things that they're currently mulling over, like specifically with I think a couple of days ago CNN came out with an article specifically about Biden's like proposed like, or some of the options that are still on the table of like barring interstate travel unless you're vaccinated, and setting up like checkpoints between states. Like I don't think that's remotely fucking legal. And I think that those are like definitely things that like really shouldn't even be thought of.
But you stated in the Discord that you would be okay with, for example, like a mass government program to just educate everybody and give out information like that, right?
Sure, if they're doing advertisements to say like, hey, this vaccine is like 99% effective or anything like that, as long as it's not like misleading people, and as long as people have informed consent, then I think the government can easily make advertising campaigns to do that 100%. But
Okay.
again, the line I think should be drawn at legally requiring people either via coercion, via like increased taxes, or by urging their employers to do that too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking broadly here, so we'd have to go into the details of specific ways we might encourage people to get vaccines. But it seems like a fair position to start out at. Regarding government spreading information and trying to educate the everybody, well, what would you say to to the conservatives who might think even that is not okay. Because we're seeing, for example, in the schools that a lot of Republicans are trying to ban critical race theory, or what they think is critical race theory, or they're trying to remove things like Letter from a Birmingham Jail or Martin Luther King in general from the history books, trying to basically whitewash history. And basically, some conservatives would say that even by the government controlling which information is being dispersed to the general population is a form of soft coercion that must be well, it's Jewish, and it must be like opposed.
Whoa, wait, what?
I'm
Whoa.
being hyperbolic here,
Whoa,
but like
whoa,
I'm being
whoa.
hyperbolic.
Hold on, real quick.
You know,
Before we get into that, I just want to say for everybody who's listening, I absolutely love the state of Israel and the Jewish people, okay? I absolutely love them. It's my favorite things in the world. We're deviating like really far off the rails here
I'm not like accusing you of holding that position or anything.
I know.
I'm just saying, like, how would you respond to those?
I'm making it. I'm making a little bit of a joke. Sorry, it's
Yeah,
a little bit of a hyperbole for a joke. But no, I think I think with the CRT specifically, I think it's two separate issues with the because I don't even know if they're like mandating that like 12-year-olds or under or get like vaccinated. I don't even know if that's like a thing. I don't think that's being proposed. But with school curriculums particularly, I think that a lot of the CRT stuff is definitely more like activist aligned and is trying to push a specific narrative, and I think that people are right to like criticize that. Because like a lot of people are kind of accurately pointing out some things that are drawn from CRT that are being implemented in public school curriculums. And I think that's part of the problem. By and large, I think a large majority of our current public school education when it comes to the civil rights movement is more towards a race neutral sort of like trying to just see people as individuals instead of as members of a specific race. And I think that a lot of people are like pointing to that as like against what they were educated with, and I think that by and large it's probably a bad idea to implement on a school curriculum.
Okay, so I mean, this is not going to be a CRT debate or a school curriculum debate because
Right.
that's not why I'm here. But I'm just drawing the comparison between the idea that like certain types of information, if they're perceived to be ideologically charged, even if they're not, it could be perceived as basically the government trying to force propaganda upon the population. So, do you think the comparison has any sort of merit, and how would you respond to that sort of criticism when you say that it's okay for the government to at least give out information to the general public regarding the vaccine?
When it comes to like you know, health advisories and stuff like that, I don't think that there's any sort of political motive that's aligned with it. With the CRT stuff, I think it is like pretty politically aligned. I think that like the broad like consensus with some of the stuff that's being pushed is very activist in nature, and I think that like by and large, nobody really wants the federal government or the education system to like push morality. You know what I mean? I think that like by and large, like some base moralities are okay in that context. Like, you know, don't steal, don't, you know, share, all that shit. But I think that like if you're pushing, it's like you need to like actively disavow your own racial identity if you're of a specific racial identity. I think that's probably bad. And
I
I
think
think that's
that's
like
good. We should all disavow our racial identities and sing
I don't
kumbaya
think
and all be
that's
a rainbow. I don't care.
I don't think that's that's what a lot of the proponents of like pro CRT positions are actually pushing, and I think you kind of understand that.
Well, I mean, look, there's a lot of ways to misapply progressive principles. Certainly, a lot of people who have taking a cursory glance at CRT believe that CRT is about saying, oh, white people are like this, black people are like this, white oppresses black, or something like that.
Mhm.
That's not how it works. I do not like this sort of like
Well,
idea that because you're born with white skin, you're an oppressor. But
mhm.
that's not how it works. Again, I'm not here to necessarily defend
Well,
CRT,
so
but I'm just saying like it's just
right.
the reason why you draw a difference between like school curriculums and teaching CRT and, for example, giving vaccine information is because you think it is ideologically charged the way
I don't
vaccines
think
you don't
I
think
don't
it
think
is.
health advisories are like ideologically charged. I think CRT definitely is. Specifically, I would also say that like one of the outcomes of CRT would be like saying that that you know, statistically black kids are more likely to be disciplined in a way that's harsh, and therefore you need to like be lenient, and you have to take the race of the person who, like, you know, you're administering discipline to into consideration. And like that on itself is probably like a no-go for most parents, because no parent wants to like wants their kid to be treated differently at school on the basis of their race. I think that's
Well,
like
like
by and
affirmative action
large.
for grades.
I think
Yikes! I do not like affirmative action
no,
for
I
grades.
didn't say
Like
I didn't say
you know,
affirmative action for grades, but I'm saying that like
leniency.
one of the things I'm saying is like push through CRT is this concept of a school to prison pipeline, and therefore like people who are receiving like things that are informed by CRT might have like, you know, you need to treat these cases differently because one of them's a black kid and one of them's a white kid, and I think that by and large like no parent wants that. And I think that's like 99% of the concerned parents like objections to CRT being implemented in the classrooms, and a lot of the rhetoric surrounding it is probably informing that. With vaccines, I don't think that there's like I think that there's like I think there's like a weird cultural thing. I think that like vaccine mandates are being pushed by people who are like it's not really about vaccines, it's about control. um but I don't think that like the government saying it's like, hey, you should get vaccinated is inherently bad. I think that they're 100% allowed to do that.
Okay, well, yeah, I wasn't meant to, try to get super into the weeds with CRT. I could try to mount a defense of it. I'm
Hmm.
I'm not going to try. I'm just gonna say, I want to open the door to the possibility that you would explore it in the future and see why, for example, it's not just, oh yeah, we gotta treat black people with more leniency, but that's not the point of what I'm talking about. So I'll leave it there.
I think it's more like being treated differently as a concept is what people have like a dissatisfaction with.
Well, sure. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. I think it's about time to move on from like CRT.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
just it's just what I use to, draw a comparison, and you seem to have found your solution for it, which is okay. Um, so while we're on the topics of schools, do you agree with the idea that we could mandate people to take the vaccine if they want to join public schools? Because we already do with certain
With
other
certain
vaccines.
vaccines, yeah, but I don't even know if the advisory for it even has covered because like last time I checked it was like 16 and over that they were recommending getting vaccinated. I don't know if it's been approved for like 12-year-olds. And again, like when it comes to kids specifically, I would say it needs to be FDA approved before we can even talk about public school mandates for it.
Well, I'm talking about like a conceptual position because this isn't really necessarily about the facts of the matter, whether or not the vaccine is or is not safe or effective. I'm more talking about like the conceptual level of if vaccines are affected, would that make it okay to mandate for children if we could prove that vaccines were effective and useful for children to have?
I guess with kids specifically, it would also depend on whether or not the demographic that you're getting vaccinated has like a high propensity for it. I know with like Delta, it is like a lot more contagious with kids. Like, but before it wasn't like really considered because COVID didn't seem to really affect kids as much as it did adults. But I mean, yeah, probably.
Right. So I
But it
see
would have to be
two.
on a state level. I like education requirements and all those sorts of things are mandated by the state, and they're not like a federal level thing.
Okay. So I see two primary possible objections to the idea that we should not require vaccines for children. So the first one is the fact that if you really don't want your child to get a vaccine, you can just take him out of the system and homeschool him, right?
Hmm.
It seems like if you really don't want to vaccinate your kid, you better keep him at home anyway. So it might end up being the better exchange for all of us. So there's that angle where you could say, okay, it's not coercive if you could homeschool your kid, although I do not generally like the idea of homeschooling. So that's the first
Why
objection.
do you not like the
What would
idea
you
of
say to that?
homeschooling?
I think it's just like stuff like, controlling the kids and what they can learn. General stuff. It's just general lefty stuff. I don't want to get too in the weeds
I
into
would
that.
say that I don't know. I'm pretty okay with homeschooling. I think that when I have kids, I will probably insist that my wife handle homeschooling, hopefully anyway. But I don't know. I think homeschooling is pretty based, but that's just my position. I don't know. Like, is there a specific aspect of homeschooling? I'm genuinely curious since you brought it up. I want to know like what is the reasoning behind that position?
Well, I think generally a lot of people homeschool their kids because they think like the government is teaching them like Marxist propaganda or stuff like that, and they want to teach like a fundamentalist or basically just alternative viewpoint, and it generally brings up kids that are not well suited both socially to interact with other people when they get out of homeschool.
I think that's
And
a common misconception about homeschool kids. Like, I'm pretty sure that the curriculums for that are pretty like stringent, and by and large, like most kids who are homeschooled or have parents that are part of like homeschooling networks that like incentivize like extracurricular activities, sports, and all that sort of shit. I think the concept of like socially maladjusted homeschool kids is like largely a myth.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I haven't researched it too much myself. I'm
Yeah.
just explaining on the conceptual level. This was, of course, also not meant to be a homeschool debate either.
Right.
I'm more curious on what you would say to the idea that homeschooling provides enough of an alternative to public school that we could justifiably mandate vaccines in public schools.
Yeah, I think private schooling also is an avenue for that if the private school has like a stance against it. I don't know. I don't really know a whole lot about the like public school anti-vax sort of stuff. I don't even know if that's like I don't know. I don't know any of these positions. My entire like thing that I wanted to get into was like a lot of prominent people were talking about vaccine mandates. So I just wanted to like strike that was like the topic that I was hoping to discuss. I guess.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think vaccine mandates in the schools would be a subset of that.
Yeah.
Presumably, you would, if you didn't want to do a blanket vaccine mandate, you would target systems like schools and then businesses and other things that we'll move on to and get to later,
Yeah. Sure.
later in our discussion. And so I was taking things one step at a time.
No, you're
So
fine. You're fine.
my question basically is, if would you be willing to concede the idea that if there are enough alternatives to public school, for example, private schooling or homeschooling, that it could be justifiable to mandate a vaccine in public schools?
Yeah, if it's recommended for kids and like there's a large enough need for it with kids, then yeah, I would say that that's fine.
Okay. So, I mean, so what I'm trying to demonstrate here, and again, I haven't actually formed my own opinion on
Hmm.
vaccine mandates, especially like a blanket mandate myself.
Hmm.
But I'm just trying to open the door to different ideas and different perspectives of how you might go and craft a nuanced strategy
Right.
to vaccinate as many people as possible, if that was your goal. And the other reason why you might want to vaccinate kids, even though they're generally more resistant to COVID than adults, is because, well, kids can spread it around, right? You don't need to get sick and die yourself to do immeasurably more harm down the line by passing it on to your parents, for example, who probably aren't vaccinated either if you're not as a child, right? And you
Hmm.
can pass it on to your grandkids and, basically, it
I,
seems to
I
be the
would
case
say with
that
that one specifically, like the parents are the ones that are like taking on the risk. And I think that
well,
that's like their
sure.
right to take on that risk if they want to.
I mean, I could argue though that as a parent, you have a responsibility to make sure your child has the best chances of success, and you cannot responsibly do that if you put your own life in risk at risk by allowing them to spread COVID to you.
Um, maybe I guess, but I honestly don't know if I would put it that way. I would say that like I would say that like because then by that definition, like parents wouldn't be allowed to take any sort of like risky profession or anything like that, or wouldn't be able to like drink or smoke or do anything that exacerbates like heart disease or something like that. I think that once we get into that sort of level, like we're really getting into like really uncomfortable territory of like controlling people's lives. I think it's a better stance to take of I think that parents should like vaccinate their kids, but I don't think the government should step in to like force that, you know what I mean? Or like or at least vaccinate for things like you know uh tuberculosis or something. I don't even know if we vaccinate for tuberculosis. Something like some of the big ones, you know what I mean?
Oh, sure. So, do you think there's a fundamental difference between tuberculosis and COVID-19?
I think tuberculosis was like much more fatal than COVID.
Well, sure. So, do you think there's like a line at which we would draw, like at which, like you say, okay, this is not fatal. It'll only cause death in 1% of cases, so it's okay. Or where would you draw the line if that is what you're
I would
planning
say
to
that
do?
that line should be drawn by individuals and not by the state.
Oh, okay. So, wouldn't that be an argument that no vaccines should be mandated then? If individuals drew the
Um,
line?
I would say that again with like, I guess with like a lot of the I don't know specifically on that one. And I would like err on saying that you should, but I don't know if I'm comfortable with like state regulations on that. But again, these are things that you can opt out of by means of like homeschooling, so maybe I don't know. I guess on like public schools I don't really have like an argument against it, but I would say that I still would say that it should be up to people, but again, they can opt out of it, I guess.
Well, sure. I think that's a reasonable position. I mean, I'm here to
Yeah.
challenge you and challenge
No,
our
yeah,
audience. So yeah.
you're being fun. You're doing good. You're doing good.
Yeah, and this is where I was accused of being a fascist because I do think we should regulate which people are allowed to be parents. As I said, I am
Oof.
one of the few leftists, or so I call myself a leftist. Other people might not, I guess. Now,
What's
but
your
I
criteria? What's your ideal criteria?
for who can become or not become a parent.
Yeah.
I haven't figured that out yet, but
Okay.
again, like I defended eugenics or at least the concept of it, right? I don't want people
Right.
with serious genetic diseases like reproducing and producing like harlequin babies who'll die in 3 hours
Well,
or something like that, you
so
know?
my position is that like I think that people should be informed, but I think that like the right to procreate is based on their own decisions, right? Like I don't think I should dictate. It's like, no, your kid's gonna be suboptimal, so you shouldn't reproduce, and you're gonna be like stopped. You're gonna get sterilized, all that sort of shit. I think that informed consent is one thing, but like forced sterilization is a completely other.
Oh, I
Um,
wouldn't force sterilize anybody,
well,
that's like pre-crime.
how would you implement that though then?
Oh, probably fines. Maybe
Ooh.
sterilize if they decide, oh yeah, I'm gonna have 12 children and they're all gonna have Tay-Sachs disease. Like maybe at that point, okay, maybe I think you're doing so much harm to the kids that you're allowing to just like be born with serious diseases that we might have to go in and sterilize you. But I don't think we need like proactively do that because that's like human rights territory. I mean, I
I
do.
think the fining part is like human rights territory. Like this is like some of the shit that implemented with like China's one child policy or something like that. Because I think a lot of that was like taxes and shit like that. I would I would say that I don't know like what led you to that conclusion specifically, but I would probably say that you should probably like really take a look at what might be like some of the end results of that, you know what I mean? because
Yeah,
that's
sure.
like
I mean,
that's some real hardcore shit, dude.
yeah, there
Um,
are a million ways for it to go wrong, and of course,
right,
we'd have to be aware of that before we entered into such a policy. Which
right,
is why I advocate for at least a left-leaning a government who will take into account things like racial disparities in yeah, in results and sorts of things, or like people, for example, who have like sickle cell anemia, or, like carriers are immune to malaria. There's a million ways for you to go wrong when you're trying to engineer the population. So
right.
I would want a very scientifically literate and probably egalitarian-minded society before I even attempted to implement those policies. But regarding the parents' choice to reproduce, I don't think that actually is a human right. I don't think reproduction is a human right. When I think about human rights, I think about the ability for a person to determine their own future, right? I have the
Hmm.
freedom to speak my own mind. I have the freedom to move where I want to move. But then there's reproduction, which is very strange because it's not about doing what you want to do. It's about forcing life and so much coercion and suffering upon someone else and like dictating their entire existence and their entire future. I don't think you could make a very good argument that reproducing and creating other people is a human right. But I mean, this is getting a little bit off track of where we were going. But I'm happy to defend like my position a little bit for now.
I would just say that again, that has like a lot of chances to be like really dangerous, especially like for any government to have like control over that specifically is like way too possible to have like rife with violations of like other people's human rights. Like I can think of like a lot of ways in which the government was just like determining that people are undesirable and shouldn't procreate is like a form of retributive punishment or something like that. And I think that's like really dystopic at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I'm willing to admit, of course, as we've seen in history, that there's a million ways this could go wrong. So we'd have to be careful when we were trying to implement these policies. But I don't think it's conceptually wrong. I think the only conceptually wrong things would be, for example, not banning people from reproducing, but going in and forcing abortions based on that policy. Like that would invade the rights of the mother. So that would be a tangential human rights violation. But the eugenics, like the original eugenics policy itself, wouldn't necessarily be a violation. And so I also think, for example, getting back to how we even got here, that the selection not just of people and their genes that they're choosing to pass on, but which people are allowed to become parents, we should be a little bit more stringent when it comes to that. For example, I wouldn't want a 12-year-old to become a mother. Like it's conceivably possible that at 12 years old you just hit puberty and you've been raped by a pedophile and then you have a child. It's conceivably possible that you could grow up to be a good parent, but I don't think that generally is the case. And if raising children is one of the most important jobs in the all of society, I don't see that we should be allowing people with frankly poor job qualifications to take such an important role in our society.
Um, yeah, I would say I would just say I disagree on that one. I think that is like really really fucking scary shit. And I would say that like we should probably try to stay away from that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, look, I mean, this is stuff that could lead to dystopian scenarios, which is why I want to be responsible when I'm saying it. But I also want to make sure that we're not saying, "Oh, eugenics, that's Nazi shit," and then just like dismiss it offhand. Like here's the chance for you, a right winger, to call me a Nazi,
no,
and it'll be
I wouldn't
great.
do that. I wouldn't do that, but I would say that like I think that like the abstract concepts of like especially with like how people describe this specifically, like this abstract concept of harm where like you're causing harm to another person by like violating their right to like not consent to being alive or not being born is like I think that it's sort of you're taking this thing like way well beyond its like logical conclusion and getting into like the like abstract definitions that lead to like really out there outcomes, you know what I mean? Like you could say that like, it's like you see this problem with like libertarians where like, everyone has a McNuke and is threatening to bomb each other if they don't like get off their lawn or some shit like that. I think that like pure ideology is probably a bad idea, and you should probably strive to like think of the actual real world implications of that and try to find like common sense solutions to that. Um, but that's just
Okay, I mean that's fair. I mean,
yeah.
I just wanted to provoke intellectual curiosity, just asking questions. I am the Nazi now. So I mean, based on your
Yeah.
answers so far, I can conclude that I don't think you're necessarily a Nazi,
Yeah,
which is
thank you. I
wonderful.
appreciate it.
I mean, Vosh called you a Nazi, and I was like, what?
Yeah,
But
he also finds horse
apparently,
stick hot, so I don't think we should take a whole lot of stock in what he says.
I mean, I do watch him fairly
Oof.
often, but
I'm
uh,
sorry, buddy. Oof.
I mean, I didn't turn out too bad, did I?
Um,
I've only advocated for eugenics and possibly a dystopian future, but I
Possible for
haven't.
sterilization, yeah. Um, but that's okay. That's okay. We
I
got
love free
we,
speech.
yeah, it's great. I I don't know where else to go from here because we were on the federal possible mandate. We went to like I guess school curriculums. Like what other federal forms of like convincing people to take vaccines do you think would be okay?
Okay. So right now, let's just like recap where we've gotten to. So basically, we've gotten to the idea that in certain circumstances, for example, in public schools, you can conceivably think of a way in which the government might be able to mandate vaccines, for example, in public schools, without necessarily
Well,
taking away the rights of the citizens.
no, my position is that I don't think that it's possible to do this on a federal level. Schools are handled on the state level.
But you're not conceptually against the idea of mandating vaccines in public schools.
I would say that's not even mandation. Mandation. Well, I guess it's mandation for entry to public schools, but public schools aren't on a federal level, so that their capacities are different from like the federal government. Like the state and the federal government's ability are two entirely different things. Like I don't think that like I guess like maybe employee mandation, but that's also kind of weird because I don't know what other vaccines they mandate like state employees to take. Um
I mean, we could talk about like, well, first of all, I wanted to say that my when I'm talking about mandating vaccines in schools, I'm speaking on a conceptual level. So in on the conceptual level, I don't think there's a fundamental difference between state and federal mandates as long as it's a mandate. But yeah, I mean,
they
if we're
are based on like what their actual powers are, which is
well,
sort of
yeah,
like
based on the Constitution, but I
yeah.
want to be able to apply this not just to American politics, but to like your moral outlook and how you could apply that to other situations outside of the United States.
Mhm. Um
Yeah, if you were like in a unitary government, I think that's what it's called.
Well, again,
Yeah,
we're
I think
we're
so.
we're,
Yeah, like
we're
what
more
would
talking about like how it is implemented on like in a U.S. context because that's the country that we're both living in. Um, I guess
that's fair.
yeah, I guess again, I think incentivization based off of like, ad campaigns or something like that would definitely be a good thing. Maybe like talking to health insurance providers to lower insurance costs for people who get vaccines might be something that the government can try to like work out with. But like anything that's coercive, I don't think the government has like the ability to do legally. Um,
Okay. I mean, as in my capacity as a leftist, I am able to see systems of coercion and oppression where none really exist. So, for example, a leftist, an anarchist might argue that even if it is the case that you're not like forcing anybody to do something, if you do
Mm.
things like provide like insurance discounts to people at such a high rate that that they might find it necessary financially to get a vaccine even though they don't want to, that could be a form of soft coercion. For example,
Yeah.
if you are like on the poverty line and like being and getting a cheaper insurance policy is the difference between you starving or you having a somewhat like close to comfortable life, you could say that there is a form of coercion there, even though you haven't actually forced anybody at the barrel of a gun to actually get the vaccine.
Right, which is why I'm sort of like tentatively saying that like I guess it would have to be like you can't raise rates. You can only like slightly lower it or something. But again, this is all like a lot of really sort of difficult shit to like get to the bottom of, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean it's fun to think about these sorts of things too, right?
No more TikTokers influenced to advertise vax. Yeah, that would be pretty good. Anytime that we have TikTokers like advertising anything, I think is a part where we're kind of living in a failed state.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I call myself a libertarian socialist who also endorses eugenics, but I mean, yeah, I am
How
willing
would
to
you
admit that
how
this
would you
talk is
implement eugenics in the libertarian framework?
well, I think it's fundamentally coercive to bring a child into this world, you know,
I'd say
and
it's
like it.
fundamentally coercive to stop people from being able to reproduce.
Well, I think the government regulates actions a lot of the times. I don't think there's anything special about reproduction that we would have
Really?
to. Yeah, but
We
I mean,
we, we
again,
don't
this
we,
is
we don't have like any sort of like major Supreme Court cases revolving around reproductive status at all in the United
I'm
States.
if you're referring to Roe v. Wade, I mean I'm
Yeah.
pro-choice. Like
Okay.
even if I'm both pro-eugenics and pro-choice. Like once you've got the child in you and it's of like, you know, a sufficient moral worth to be like considering, then at that point and if we were to consider the rights of the mother, like the bodily autonomy aspect, not just like not actually the reproduction aspect itself, then I think at that point you could make an argument that we should not be forcing abortions upon people. And I'm pretty comfortable with the idea that we should not force abortions upon people, you know?
Okay.
But yeah. So where were we? Um, do you want to get to the military? What do you think about the military mandating vaccines? Because I think there is a right answer here.
I think the military already mandates vaccines. Again, once you get to like FDA approval, then I think you probably could legally do that.
What about like even without FDA approval? Since I would argue that part of joining the military is that you agree to sacrifice your body and autonomy for the good of the state, right? It presupposes that you agree
Um,
that the state is legitimate and that your
there's
rights
there's
get.
caveats to that. Like there's an understanding that like the state can't order you to do something that's illegal. And I would say that like being forced to like give away all bodily autonomy is probably not legal, but again it would have to be on like a case by case basis, I guess.
I mean, sure. The point is though that I think if we're going to be allowing a situation in which soldiers might like hypothetically be in danger of getting blown up by a missile, that I
Mm-hmm.
think mandating vaccinations isn't it doesn't really stack up to that. And I think if we compared like the risk factors and that I'd probably be comfortable with mandating a vaccine for military because I don't want my military like soldiers to all be sick when the invasion doesn't come because nobody would invade America. But you know, when it hypothetically
I
comes,
mean,
you know.
again, also the military is like a as a voluntary organization, so I mean, yeah, sure, why not?
Okay, so it's conceivably possible that vaccine mandates in the military could also be justified.
Yeah, but again, I still think that they need to get FDA approval. I think that any sort of non FDA approved vaccine would probably be human experimentation.
I mean, to some extent, all clinical trials are human
Right, but
experimentation.
those are voluntary opt-ins. Like people are given like informed consent on that subject.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fair. I suppose.
Yeah,
Hmm.
informed consent
Where
is
do I?
definitely like a big important thing.
Okay, so where do I gonna go next? Hmm. Do you want to talk about? Do you want to talk about businesses?
Sure.
Okay, so basically the hypothetical argument for businesses, it
Hmm.
might go somewhere along these lines. Well, first of all, it's not profitable for companies or good for workers' health to constantly be rotating COVID patients out of the job site.
Hmm.
A company which doesn't care anyway and would let its workers die off. I mean, it would have to offer higher wages to attract from a smaller pool of workers, but that also might exert coercive pressure on the poor who might actually depend on that slightly higher wage in order to survive.
Hmm.
So it might end up rewarding anti-vaxxers for working in more dangerous conditions. So you can make an argument like on the whole that not that vaccine mandates would protect the working class, which I think is pretty intuitive.
So with workers, like I'd have to also know like do employers are employers privy to like any other sort of like contagious medical issue? Because like I because what I've so one of the things that I've read, an anecdotal example that I've read is like somebody was informed that they would be required to receive a vaccine to like continue working at their job, and then they basically called in and said like, okay, well, I want to know the exact like status of people in terms of like hepatitis, HIV, any sort of bloodborne transmission, and also like whether or not like other employees have that, and then they just sort of like dropped it. I don't think that employers are able to get into like people's personal medical records like that, and I think that people have a right to like anonymity with their stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think it's the right of so you don't think it's the right of the employers to mandate that their workers are vaccinated? Because
No, I don't think so.
It's clearly conceivable that if you had an outbreak in your
I
workplace
think
that it might hurt
employers
your
are
bottom
right.
line.
I think employers have the right to do like medical screenings outside of their businesses, specifically like check their temperature, ask if they've been feeling sick or if they've coughed anything, and to send workers home if they like show symptoms. But I don't think that they have a right to like mandate that like they show proof of vaccination.
Well, just for the sake of argument, I'm pretty sure that COVID spreads even among asymptomatic people.
Yeah, yeah, but like by and large, I think it's like generally more common for people who are symptomatic to spread it. I could be wrong though, but again, like I think that those are like screenings, and like you can have conditions of like trying to mitigate that and do like contact tracing. But when it comes to like personal like vaccination records, I don't think that they have the right to do that specifically.
So would you be in favor of one of these like anti mandates that have been enacted in a few red states uh, where the Republicans do what they all are famous for doing and regulate the businesses to make sure that they cannot mandate vaccinations at their workplace?
Um, I don't. I think that's. I don't. Again, I don't know if like it's even legal for workplaces to mandate vaccinations. Um, at least in the U.S., I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah. So would you conceptually support the idea of a law banning the practice of employers requiring vaccines?
Probably. Yeah, I'd say that's fine, especially since like I think we have like anonymity for like other medical conditions.
Okay. I want to take a cheap shot and say that it's
Mhm.
very funny that Republicans usually say they're against regulating businesses, but in the one case where it's objectively demonstrable that requiring vaccines would help the American population, they want to regulate it to make sure it's not the case.
I think that by and large, like specifically with that, it's more of like speaking to a cultural issue than it is talking towards like, I guess like any sort of abstract good or bad position. And I think that people put a lot of stock into that, and I think that's their right to put stock into that position.
Okay, well, I just wanted to do the meme of vaguely gesturing at imagined hypocrisy when I'm talking about Republicans trying to regulate businesses.
I mean, like, I'm not like anti-regulation, so yeah, I don't know what to tell you on that one.
Okay, so yeah, my cheap shot flew right past you and hit, I don't know, Rand Paul or something. Um,
Sure, why not?
you you, you talked a little bit, and this is a little bit of a tangent, but you talked a
We've
bit
been
about
on
the
nothing
gay
but
wedding cake.
tangents today, but it's all good, dude.
Oh yeah,
I
well
like
yeah,
tangents.
I love tangents.
Yeah,
They're the
tangents are
best.
fun.
So you talked a bit with the last guy. What was his name? Something discourse. Very good discourse you
Critical
had with him, I must
discourse.
say.
Yeah, he's in my chat,
Very
arguing with my
fun
chat
name.
again. I
Um,
wonder if he's listening. Hi, buddy.
I wonder if he hates me.
I don't know. Maybe. I don't even know if he's listening. I think he's just arguing with my chat, which is not good. Don't get mad at the
Ah,
internet,
that
buddy.
yeah, that imposter leftist talking to this crypto Nazi. It's
Yeah.
the end of the world. Okay.
Yeah.
So what do you? Can you reiterate your position on the gay wedding cake thing, and
I
how it would relate or not relate to the freedom for businesses to regulate, that vaccine stuff?
Well, one, I think that the wedding cake thing was, again, one, they didn't want to be part of a religious ceremony that they didn't agree with, and two, I think there's like some aspect of like him calling it artwork, particularly, that might have spoke onto it. The bakery itself did not say that they couldn't purchase anything. It's just they wouldn't make anything custom for them. They wouldn't like take commission work for it.
Okay. And do you think there's a fundamental difference between requiring that your employees get vaccinated or potentially requiring that your customers get vaccinated?
Um, I think, again, I don't necessarily know if like that's an applicable analogy, simply because like I don't think that there's any businesses who's like, hey, are you gay? Do you like to like do stuff with other dudes at the door? You know what I mean? I think that would be like the analogistic thing, and I don't think that's like what's going on.
Oh yeah, I mean, I made that analogy on the spot. I admit it could be a bit of a reach, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just asking questions, just jacking off.
Yeah, you're all good,
Um,
dude.
so I mean, based while we're on this tangent, what I think would make the difference between like whether or not.
However, I will say this: like, if a business requires that people like wear masks entirely, then like that's fine. But I think it would have to be like a blanket thing. I don't think you can just like add provisions for non-vaccinated people, because I don't think there's a way to like prove that. I mean, I guess you could, and just like anyone who says that they're vaccinated, just taking on the honor code. But I don't know if people who aren't vaccinated are like being super honest at those things, you know what I mean?
Sure. And what's the difference between masks and vaccines again?
The mask specifically one is to like stop like the spread of people who might have it.
Well, isn't the primary purpose of vaccines to do that as well?
Yes, but well, no, it's actually I think the vaccine is specifically to stop like is to offer more personal protection.
But I
Because
mean,
I think like aren't they saying that like people with the vaccine can still spread it?
they're much less likely to.
Right.
I mean, I think you could argue that vaccines are meant to stop the further spread of the coronavirus. I mean, it's the case that the more vaccinated people there are, the less unvaccinated people for the coronavirus to circulate around and potentially mutate into a vaccine resistant variant. So the idea that everybody must be vaccinated in order to permanently and completely protect the population, I think that's an idea that lends itself to a policy where you would consider vaccination a means by which you would prevent the spread to other people as well.
Oh, I think we're long past the point where it's going to like mutate and spread. Like I think that any like attempt to like stop that right here and now with like vaccines is like probably not going to happen. I think the important thing with that would be, because I think COVID's probably going to end up like the flu. I think it's going to end up as a seasonal thing that's going to be with us for a long time. Just because of
But
like
couldn't
how
you make it
easily it
less bad?
spreads.
Couldn't you make that seasonal stuff less bad by vaccinating as many people as possible?
Right, but like this is again something that people opt into. I think that like that's their right to opt into it, and if people don't feel comfortable with it, then that's right their right to not opt into it. I think the government has every right to do advertising to encourage people to do it, but I don't think they have the means in which to mandate it.
Okay. Um, I want to get back to our tangent because I love doing that. For the gay
Mm-hmm.
wedding cake example, I think there's basically three differences by which I might say that something is or is not legitimate discrimination. First, there's the matter of artistic expression, right? You can't force
Mm-hmm.
somebody to make a piece of culinary art that disagrees with what their fundamental beliefs are. Uh, Two is related to that in that if it's a small business, it's more likely that the business will have its own like moral mission. Like I don't think businesses like Walmart or Target can actually hold moral positions because it's just like this huge conglomerate that's designed to make money, right? No matter how many times they pretend that they're going to like go green or like donate to like cancer patients or whatever. I think the main point of Walmart is always to get money and yeah, always to get more profit, and anything after that comes secondary. So I think the size of the business it influences the ability of the people within that business to make their own decisions about which type of people that they want to support. And the third reason that the third difference that I would make between a small business refusing service to somebody and a big business like Walmart is that it just big businesses, they occupy such a large amount of the market that it could be impossible if enough of those large businesses refuse service to you, it could be impossible for you to like feasibly survive, right? So if the size of the
Well, I
business
mean, like
actually
that
like
case wasn't even about like them being like disallowed from buying anything. It was simply like the actual wedding itself. Like it was a shopped around thing too. Like that's the other thing is that like I think they called like multiple bakeries to like find one that would disagree with that and just basically say no.
okay. Yeah, because I mean, I'm just saying that there might be a fundamental difference between a small business like you saying that it's not like I can't put in on my conscience to make a wedding cake that disagrees with my values versus like this mega corporation who clearly only cares about money and who occupies such a large place in the market that refusing service to a person might create coercive pressures upon that person because occupy such a large amount of the market. Do you
Okay.
understand what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying.
So yeah, I mean, a lot of leftism is about like analyzing ways that you can exert soft power on people. You know, like
Mhm.
coercive things that might not even be intentional, right? But
Mhm.
it remains the case that even if there was no original singular perpetrator of something, for example, like white supremacy or something like that, that there could still in fact be people who are coerced in some way or oppressed in some way, and that those concerns should be addressed or explored at least.
Sure, but I think part of the problem is that you also have to keep in mind like the actual like facts on the ground of the case in particular and understand that like this concept might not be like a like outward example of this like larger problem. It might just be like people being dicks to each other, and at a certain point like you can't really regulate against that. You can like try to encourage against it or something, but at the end of the day like people are going to have to be allowed to just be like bad to each other at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I think at a micro scale that should be allowed. I mean, I'm I'm pro keeping hate speech legal and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I think when it comes to a systemic level, if there are businesses that operate on that systemic level, it could create big problems. For example, like redlining. If you just owned every block in this huge town, and then you just like tried to redline people, then like if you're a black person living within that town, like you have no choice, you're fucked.
Right.
So like I think the size of the business and the scale that we're talking about changes how you might go about crafting policy to address those issues.
Sure, but yeah, but I would also say that that wasn't what the cake shop example was.
Oh yeah, I didn't say it
Yeah.
was. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
just
I was just making sure.
I'm just doing my part as a leftist to try to grift to your audience to open the door to considering what
Yeah, you're
leftist
fine.
principles might bring to the table intellectually.
Yeah, you're
So
fine.
yeah,
I think you lost a lot of them with the eugenics thing, but I think I think
that's
you're
okay.
I think you're fine. Like for the most part, you're doing okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
I would only genocide a small group of people.
yeah. Um,
Oh gosh,
I
I'm
think
gonna get canceled.
I think by and large, like we would kind of agree with each other on a lot of topics. Specifically, I think like you'd probably be against like banking measures going after like specific individuals to stop them from being able to like actually engage with like businesses or like commerce at all. And I think that that's probably like a thing that needs to be regulated against specifically. Like I have a large problem with like how banking is done in the US. um but I think when it comes to like individual levels, like a person, like an individual small business's ability to like really impact people's like day to day like ability to live is very minute. Like if they were saying it's like, no, you're gay, you can't like shop here, I think that would be in violation. But like when like the threshold gets passed once you're like, yeah, you need to like you need to interact with this cultural shift. You need to like embrace it. You can't just like be left alone. You have to engage with it now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just the case that we would agree that small businesses and like sole proprietorships, they're much more capable of acting on the individual level at which we might accept some amount of bigotry or discrimination, whereas we wouldn't want it our large scale.
Hmm.
So what do you think about the seatbelt analogy? What do you think about requiring that that manufacturers put seatbelts and airbags in their cars?
Well, seatbelts and like seatbelts specifically, like the mandates on that are more about manufacturers being required to create like the possibility of safeguards. I don't think that there should be a mandate for people to wear seatbelts. I don't think you should be able to be ticketed because you're not wearing a seatbelt. But I think that like it should be encouraged to be worn.
Okay, but if you're not going to mandate that people are wearing seatbelts, then how exactly does your argument that that manufacturers must include seatbelts hold up?
I think it's
Because
the same
clearly,
thing for drug manufacturers who are required to like put in use of directions on their drugs that they sell. Like you need to like give it's like, hey, if you take more than 6 of these Tylenol, you might develop health complications. You might like run into health problems. So you need to make sure that you are careful and only take the correct dosage. I think that is I think that's fine. I think that's like acceptable. But I think that once you get into the level of like individuals, like like citizen, you need to like show that you've only taken 5 Tylenol today before you've taken your 6th one. I think that's when we get into like sort of egregious infractions on other people's personal liberty.
okay, I guess the argument against that, and of course, a lot of the times I'm just playing devil's advocate, but the
Hmm.
argument against that might be that, for example, including your seatbelt on your car, I mean, if we knew that the customer wasn't going to wear the seatbelt anyway, you might say, yeah, you don't even need to put it there. But the argument against that might be that that putting that seatbelt there in a convenient position makes people just more likely to more likely to put on that seatbelt and save some lives, rather than going out of the way to get it. And that indirectly, through mandating that manufacturers have seatbelts, you would save so many lives that the consideration of personal freedom for something which we objectively know, which is
Well, I
the
don't
case,
think that
that
businesses
seatbelts
have the
work,
same
would.
personal freedom as individuals. Like we're mixing these two things up because like I'm okay with manufacturers being required to put in seatbelts. I'm not super stoked about like individuals being required to put on seatbelts when they're operating a motor vehicle.
Well, sure. I mean, it's just that my argument would be that requiring manufacturers to put in seatbelts, it's a way to increase indirectly the amount of people who willingly put on the seatbelts, because you're not putting it out of the way and making them go out of the way to get it. So it might you might have considerations beyond just the simple facts about freedom and sorts when you're talking about systemic like policy.
Again, I don't think that like requiring standards for manufacturers is the same as like individual mandates. Again, we're getting really lost into like the manufacturer versus the individual.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
I don't want to press too much on that. I think I got your position pretty clearly.
Yeah.
I think we're coming near the end.
All right.
So what do you think about? So, which one do I want to do? The eugenics take or the freedom take?
We already took the eugenics. We already talked about eugenics, so let's
I
hear
have
about
another
freedom.
eugenics take. I have
Okay.
another eugenics take. Which
All
one
right.
do you want? The eugenics take or the freedom
Let's take
take?
the
Which
freedom
sounds
one. That sounds probably a little bit less like I'm gonna get in trouble. Susan's gonna get mad at me. One. Yeah. We'll do the freedom one.
okay. So the freedom take is pretty simple, basic leftist theory shit.
Mm-hmm.
I want the freedom to live in a world where my safety to move around isn't constantly limited by the fact that pandemics are an annual occurrence and that they constantly threaten my life. So
Okay.
it could be argued that requiring vaccines across the board now, it might be a small price of freedom to pay for future freedoms, like the ability to move around without getting the plague. It might be the case that you think the future freedoms that you would reserve by mandating vaccines now would outweigh the amount that you take away freedoms at the current moment.
I would reply to that with the adage of Benjamin Franklin that says, people that replace or people who trade in freedom for security deserve neither. I think that was Benjamin Franklin anyway. I think that freedoms are things that are non-negotiable, even if it's like a personal like statement thing. And I would say that with pandemics specifically, there are steps that you can take to remove your threat to that. You can wear personal protection. N95 masks are really cheap now, and you can probably find them. And if you are very worried about that, as with people who have like compromised immune systems already have to deal with, there are steps that you can take that will mitigate any sort of negative interaction that you might have by like doing all these things. Whereas like at the end of the day, you're saying that people like that aren't you should do what you want to do so that you feel more secure, you feel more safe. And I think that that is probably immoral.
Sure. I mean, I might also say that I also think that freedoms and rights are absolute, and I think the freedom and preservation of consent are important. Therefore, I'm an anti-natalist. But okay, and let's just go. That I think that leads us to my last point that I prepared, which is the eugenics take.
Mm-hmm.
So the eugenics take is basically that as long as vaccines are, and this I think, wait, eugenics take is the take that I would use to justify possibly not having a vaccine mandate. So I might argue that as long as vaccines are widely available, anybody who chooses to stay unvaccinated, either because they have no regard for the lives of others or they're plain stupid, don't even deserve to be saved. Like, why would we force them to stay alive if they're so hell-bent on killing themselves and everyone around them?
I think it's a really dark road that we go down about people's like personal choices and whether or not they receive medical care. I think that there is an argument to be made, maybe if you're talking about, transplants specifically, because there's a limited source of that. But I don't think that we should be limiting medical treatment based on whether or not people like do things that we want them to do. I think that the alcoholic does deserve medical treatment, even if it's something that's 100% self-inflicted. I think that there is a right to like say, okay, well, the alcoholic probably isn't going to be the first in line for a liver transplant. That's probably going to go to the 6-year-old who needs it also. I think there is like a prioritization for that, but I think that like with vaccines specifically, I don't think that we should like bar medical care from them.
I mean, I wasn't talking specifically about medical care. I was just saying that like you don't need
I
to
think
mandate vaccines upon people because the people who insist on not getting vaccines aren't necessarily that worth saving anyway. It's a cynical take, but it's just like, that's just a thought that I had. It's not that I necessarily believe it, but it's just
okay.
like, okay, well, we'd have less Republicans in the world voting against what I want. Like there's less horrible or stupid people to oppose me in my future goals. So why not let them just not take the
I
vaccine?
think one of the
What happens to them
largest group
happens
of
to them.
unvaccinated people in America is black people, so that might also lead to some very bad optics there. At least I think. I
Yeah,
could be
I mean,
wrong.
it would be terrible optics. Obviously, as I said, this is a very cynical take. Nobody
Yeah.
would trot this out as their optical argument, but it's just a thought.
Yeah.
So I mean, of course, if you were to take that line of thinking, which neither of us I think are taking it, then the counter argument would be that the collateral damage due to mutations in the virus or during the vaccine research periods when people are not vaccinated, that the collateral damage of that might be too much, and that it's still worth mandating a vaccine.
Again, I don't think that we've gotten to a point where, like, even in the really bad times of December, where we got to like peak, like hospitalization. I don't think we had like people who were dying due to beds being overfilled with people who have COVID. I think that if general vaccine effectiveness holds, and we'll probably not see that, even if there's like a large contingent of people who just refuse to get vaccinated. And I think at this point, it's largely a cultural issue. And I think that, I think that people have a right to refuse it. And I think people have a right to take it too. So.
All right, well, that's basically the end of everything that I've prepared. I got to run very soon, so
All right.
I just wanted to say that this conversation was very productive from one accused neo-Nazi to another, and that I would like to grift to your audience, tell them to subscribe to a nihilist on YouTube
You
and
should probably
consider
type
that.
that in the chat because that's a little
Oh no, in the
harder
chat.
to. Yeah, in the chat, you should probably type out like the name of the channel if you want
I mean, it's
people to find it.
A and then nihilist.
Yeah.
I don't have your stream open right now, but yeah. So yeah, I would just, well, first of all, shill to your audience, tell them to subscribe to my channel, and
I only shill to
just
people who
consider
pay me. I only shill for people who pay me.
that we're not all just like, woke libtards trying to like cancel everybody. We got a few arguments here or there that you might want to consider and add to your repertoire, whether or not you agree or not. You want to like consider it for a bit. And if you're going to explore a little bit of leftist theory, you might as well do it on my channel because I am a grifter.
All
But yeah,
right.
that's pretty much it.
No, you're a salesman on that front. Like if you genuinely believe what you're saying, you're not a grifter.
Well, I think I can be a grifter and also believe what I'm saying.
No,
You know, I
like
think
grifting it requires that it's something you actually don't believe. Like you're selling a position
look,
that you don't actually believe.
I think televangelists might, to some extent, actually be Christian. But again, I don't want to try too hard to fight you on my right to identify myself as a grifter.
All
But
right.
you know,
All right.
you can insist that I'm not a grifter if you want. Okay. But yeah,
All
I
right.
got it. I got to run. So it was good talking to you again. I guess we'll probably disagree on some more stuff soon.
All right. Well, peace out. Have a good one, dude.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
Okay.
Oh yeah, and I'll be
Oh,
plagiarizing. Oh wait, I'll be plagiarizing. Can I plagiarize your stream and put it on my channel as well?
yeah, you're fine, dude. That's fine.
All right, bye.
All right. All right.